Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Man Thing from 2005. So, this character, of course, is a Marvel character. My appeal of wanting to watch this movie is because Man Thing is going to be reintroduced into possibly the MCU by us having him in the Werewolf by Night movie, because I quickly saw some scenes of Man Thing being used in that film. I'm like, okay, great. Like, regardless of how that movie may or may not appeal to people, I'm like, great, we have Man Thing being used in the MCU. I was excited about that. And I was like, great, like, we have a movie that is soon going to be put out. It has a supernatural horror like genre. I'm like, great, this is cool. I thoroughly have always wanted to have a Werewolf by Night movie, and now we're getting this. So cool. So now going on, and let's talk about Man Thing from 2005. So, for the comic book version of this character, we have a guy named Ted Solis who is to transform into the Man Thing after taking a SO2 serum and getting into a car crash, which coincidentally had him die within the mystical swamp. So, this serum was supposed to be yet another one of those like super soldier serum kind of things that end up failing, and this serum, come to find out, just creates monsters. uh, a lot of times you would probably go on and compare Man Thing a ton to Swamp Thing, because that's the easy comparison. And you can't help but also think in certain iterations of both characters, they looked very similar between both of them at certain points. But anyways, so Man Thing in this movie is to still be Ted Solis, and it seems that this guy is to have the dark water swampland, and it seems that we have a guy named Renee who is coming in, who is desperately wanting Ted to sell this land, and he just won't. This swampland. Because there is to be stories about a guardian that is to be in this swamp, and Ted, for the life of him, could not go on and sell this. And so Renee was to talk to a guy named Schist to try and figure out some way to bargain with Ted to get this land. And since Ted would not budge, they decided to kill him off and dump him into this swamp. And then build a oil drilling tower on top of his buried location. So Ted, who of course had believed in the guardian of this swamp, had somehow reincarnated himself into the Man Thing to then go on and protect this swamp from things like Schist and the people of his company, to then seek vengeance upon Ted's death. So, kind of a vengeful spirit and so on and so forth, where he is to kill people regardless of uh, of who they are, just kind of kill them off. So, with the exclusion of one woman. So, with that said, uh, we at some point have to, throughout this film, understand possibly the references and the origin story of the Man Thing character, or at some point had realized that Ted had just ran off and the Man Thing had just been summoned regardless. We have to kind of make that assumption. So, but we mainly focus on the new sheriff in town, Kyle, because we also have at some point need to realize what had happened to the prior sheriff, as well as the sheriff who had gone on and spoken to the coroner, who is Val, to kind of cook the books or to cook certain paperwork because there were some unusual deaths that they could not explain. And so Sheriff Jim would turn to Val and just tell him to write these off as gator attacks because they could not explain these deaths or make any sense of them, so they just wrote them off as just like, well, gator deaths. Makes sense, right? So Kyle is to go on and meet with a certain number of characters within this town and is to start to get a feel of the town and try and go on and figure out what is really going in this, or what is happening really in this Darkwater, and why are all these people dying. Because Kyle, when appearing at this police station, is to realize that there is a mass number of missing people's cases. And when Kyle is to question Fraser about it, Fraser's just like, I don't know. Like, they're just all missing. Like, it's unexplained. And Kyle is like, okay, all right. So, yeah, so with that said, I'm going to try my best to try and explain this movie. And let's go on and let's just get into spoilers about this one. So the grading of this movie, where can you find this film? Currently, this movie is available on Tubi, Tubi. The grading of this movie really comes down to one scene. But not only that, like, it really focuses on Sheriff Kyle so much and not Man-Thing enough, the title character, which I'm like, ugh. But, like, this movie just didn't have any budget. It was a sci-fi movie, which, of course, even tells you, like, made-for-TV movies don't really have a big budget. So, like, they were trying a bunch of stuff, and it failed. But the real crux of this scene is, more than likely at some point, this movie was to probably run out of money to film in the swamp, because we can obviously tell at one point in the scene we have Kyle and we have Terry who are walking in this very dark location where we can't really see anything, and we just see this like random clips of this forest or this brush or this or this that, and like we have these characters just tossing these flashlights just crazily around, and I'm like, this scene obviously should have been edited out, but I guess for time they had no more money to do stuff with this swamp, and they needed to just kind of do something where these characters were making their way through this swamp, and this goofy scene was just left because of just clearly the budget of this film. Because more than likely, they're probably, if I were to have talked to the people that made this film, or were to have talked to the people that were like, yeah, like we would have wanted there to be a lot more Man-Thing scenes in this movie, but things just didn't work out, so this is where we are. This is what the finished product of this movie was. So, yeah, for a made-for-TV film. That's what this was originally. So, with that said, let's just go on into Double Five. Let's just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So, it's a bad film, but like I would want so much so for me to just say that it was a positive. But yeah, like it comes off as such a generic horror film, and like to me, I was like, if you were to compare this movie to like obviously like the Swamp Thing movie or the Swamp Thing show. Uh, like it just comes off as a way cheaper, less than version than any of those things. And of course, Swamp Thing is to be the immediate comparison to Man Thing in a number of ways. Because it's being its like DC comic book counterpart. So, anyways, yeah, let's go on into spoilers. Let's go into spoilers for this one. So, in the very beginning of this film, we have Billy and we have Sarah, who are to be in the swamp, going on and like having this party, having this camp. So, having this kind of party because they've been working so hard. So we have Billy and we have Sarah going further and further into the swamp as they are to be on this boat, and they start undressing to the point, of course, we end up seeing the top half of Sarah completely unclothed. And so they start making out, going at it, and whatever. And all of a sudden, we then hear a noise within this swamp. Billy ends up turning and thinking, like, okay, like somebody's watching us. And all of a sudden, come to find out, we have this branch that comes out of nowhere and stabs into Billy because, of course, he's wearing the Schist company uniform. And so we have Man Thing seeing Billy as a threat, so he is trying to eliminate this threat. All of a sudden, we have Sarah with huge mounds of blood all over her chest, and we then see Billy getting hauled away into the swamp. And Sarah, later on, we see is in some mental hospital where she is such in shock, where she cannot go on and make a statement or anything like that, which again feels like a wasted scene to even have in this film. Like, if this person can't give you a statement or can't tell you what happened because she is just so crazed and whatever, then you shouldn't even have this kind of scene if there is nothing that we could additionally add with this character. Or have her be the like the woman you tie our main character to. Anyways, so we have Sheriff Kyle that arrives to the Bywater sheriff station, where of course it seems you need a boat to seemingly get anywhere. So Sheriff Kyle is to mention to Deputy Frazier that, hey, I'm the new sheriff in town. And so we have Sheriff Kyle, who's to go into the previous sheriff's office, seeing that there is this this big board up where the sheriff is to make all these connections to a guy named Rene LaRogue, or LaRoe. So we have Deputy Frazier that's saying, like, well, hey, how about I go on and I get rid of all of this stuff that the previous sheriff had gone on and done. And Kyle's like, no, just kind of keep it up, like it's fine. So, and I already mentioned the whole thing about the missing persons and how there's like a mass number of them. So, and Frazier just doesn't have anything to say. So Sheriff Kyle and Frazier make their way to the coroner, Val, and they are to, of course, have this body, and it's Billy's. So, come to find out, we have Sheriff Kyle that is asking Val, like, why do we have like so much, like we have a lot of plants, we have a lot of like stuff all over this man's body, and Val is to go on and say it's like, well, that's what happens when a body has been like in a swamp within X amount of time. And Kyle is just like, well, okay. So we have Kyle wanting the coroner to do like a workup on the body and so on and so forth. So Kyle and Fraser are to go off to find that there is some construction site that is being halted because of protesters that have chained themselves onto this bulldozer. So we have Schist and we have a guy named Gerber who have this megaphone and they're trying to go on and basically just make fun of these people to try to get them off this land. And we have Terry and all these people that are like, no, we're just going to stay here. So Sheriff Kyle and Fraser make their way to the site. And so Kyle is talking to Schist and Gerber. And so, like, Kyle is new in town, and it seems that Schist is to say it's like, well, uh, since I'm the rich guy, like, you're gonna know how things are to kind of be run around here. And Kyle's like, nah, like, I don't care if you're rich or not. Like, I don't give a like. So Kyle ends up going on and talking to the protesters, and is to take this microphone or this megaphone away from Gerber and Schist for them to continue to not interrupt Kyle. So Kyle, of course, starts to talk to Terry, who is to be this teacher, and she, of course, is to turn around and trying to tell Kyle that, hey, like, you shouldn't go on and be handcuffing us and trying to stop us. If anything, you should be trying to arrest Schist because he is the real problem in this town. And we have Kyle that's like, okay, like, I think I've heard enough. So Kyle ends up trying to get these bolt cutters, and when Terry is to realize that Kyle is to try and stop them, Terry believes so much so in what they're doing that Terry ends up kicking Kyle in the nuts. And so now, considering that this is assaulting an officer, Kyle then has the uh, the chain broken, and Kyle ends up lobbing Terry over his shoulder and is to drag her into this car and is to arrest her. So after Kyle goes on and starts talking to Terry, like helping Kyle get a feel for this town, but then is to also get to understand Terry a little bit more and why like she was to like feel the way she felt about what she did. So Kyle hears her out and then decides like, well, hey, I'm not going to book you for anything. Like, for the life of me, I can't go on and like arrest a school teacher. But not only that, like a person that was a protester. Like, I'll never hear the end of it. So Kyle lets Terry go, and so the next thing that we end up having happen is that Kyle is to make his way to this diner to meet with a guy named Pete Horn. And it seems that Pete is to know guys like Renee and is to also know about Ted, the guy who had gone missing. And so, because Kyle is to start questioning certain photos that were to be from the prior sheriff's investigation, and Frazier is to tell Kyle that one of the guys is to be Renee, this chameleon kind of guy, who is to slip out of their fingers so many times. And it seems that this previous sheriff had figured something out, some connection. And Kyle is trying to chase that same connection. So, as like Kyle is starting to also, like, while Terry was there, like, ask her certain things about this precinct. So, anyways, so in a very roundabout way, just whatever. So Kyle goes on to this diner, and when Kyle finds this diner, he's like, "Wow, this diner is very unusually decorated." And they're like, "Yeah, like that's a diner." So Kyle ends up meeting up with Terry, and Terry's to tell Pete that she ended up getting arrested by Kyle. It's the new sheriff, it's the city sheriff. So, come to find out, Kyle has a sweet tooth, and so does Pete. And Pete ends up going on and taking a bunch of sugar and dousing it onto this counter and starts doing this design of which that is to possibly be the Man Thing. So, we have these two men, both Wayne and Rodney, that are to go on and talk to Kyle. And because he is like the big city cop, and they are, of course, these kind of redneck guys, they're just kind of uh, getting the feel for this new sheriff. As well as we also have Mike Plug, who is to be this cameraman that has these two Rottweilers, and both Wayne and Rodney are to, of course, be upset with this guy bringing in these two dogs into this diner, and so that's when Kyle ends up going on to talk to these men, um, and so on and so forth. So we have, of course, Kyle going on and meeting with both Wayne and Rodney again at some point, and we then find out that Kyle realizes that that Jake Schist is to be with both Wayne and Rodney while they're kind of sharing beers together, and Wayne and Rodney are to uh, be trying to perfect these gator skulls. So we have Kyle talking to Wayne and Rodney, and so they go on and they talk about like what their business is here, what they do, and so on and so forth. So moving on. So we have at some point where now Kyle wants to go off into the swamp. And so while Kyle goes on into the swamp, we have at one point that he even loses like radio signal while going through the swamp. And Kyle goes on into the swamp, and we have him kind of regretting his decision to go through the swamp, because he's realizing that it's like, man, like this job was only going to be temporary, and I thought I was going to get some beer gut, and I thought I was going to get a tan, but instead I'm just going to get eaten alive by bugs. So at some point, Kyle, while going through the swamp, is to bump into Renee, all while Kyle is to get in this trap and be hung upside down. And so Renee is to explain to Kyle who Renee is, and that Renee went on to try and sell Ted's land but regretted it afterwards. because of course this led Ted being killed off by Schist, and Renee witnessed that. And so while Kyle is hearing this story from Renee, it seems that Kyle is to buy this story, but at some point, Kyle is to also realize that Kyle needs to continue to find Renee within the swamp, because Kyle realizes that Renee is also in danger. So we have Kyle that goes on to make his way back to his vehicle after trying to talk to Renee, and then he disappears. So, and that was like the one guy that Kyle like wanted to find within this dark water, this swamp. So when Kyle makes it back to his car, all of a sudden a body falls on his windshield, and that ends up being, of course, Sheriff Jim Corley's body. And so we have Kyle, who ends up taking Sheriff Jim's body to the coroner. It's like, well, yep, that's Sheriff Jim's body. And so we have, of course, Kyle talking to Val, and in the past, I guess there were some unusual deaths that they just wrote off as gator attacks because they couldn't justify it. And so Jim was to not be able to figure this out, so like he just went on and was to just have these things being gator deaths. So anyways, we go further on, and so we of course have the schist drill like construction site that is to go on and get attacked. So we have both Jake, we have both Gerber that are at this construction site, and they end up hearing some noises, and so Jake Schist ends up shooting wildly into the forest, not knowing what that was. He just starts shooting. And then he starts to make his way further into the woods, chasing after something. So Gerber, who is his security guard, is like, dude, I'm not going to run after anything. Like, you guys don't pay me enough. So Gerber all of a sudden is kind of waiting things out, and then he starts to hear noise, which wants him to rush back into this little shack of where they're working, and Gerber thinks he's safe just because he's in this shack. Gerber ends up still hearing this noise, and so he shoots out of the shack to create this hole in this door. And then the next thing we end up seeing is Man-Thing bursting through this door and this wall to kill off Gerber. And we have Sheriff Kyle and Fraser, who make their way to the site as Fraser is now puking because of the site. And Sheriff Kyle is to realize, wow, this is an unusual death. Like, somehow this branch is somehow to be from the inside out of this guy. Like, how does this make sense? And so that's when Kyle talks to the coroner, and they explain, yeah, there was always some unusual deaths that they couldn't explain. So we have at some point in this film that we have Kyle, who goes on with Terry to try to talk more to Pete. And like, if before Pete wasn't just getting introduced to Kyle. Now Kyle is going to go on and hopefully get more of a conversation with him and Pete. So Pete, of course, is to go on and talk about Ted having this land and that Ted was to be the mitigator between Schist and Ted. And then some people thought that Ted was to go on and sell the land and run off with the money, or that Schist ended up killing off Ted and burying him in the swamp. And so, but Pete is to also tell Kyle about the possible guardian that is inside the swamp called the Man Thing. Or he ends up just calling it the Guardian, and Kyle is like, oh, that must be that Man Thing. So, because they come up with the name at some point in the film. So, because I think they end up coming up with it like later on in the film, where like Kyle and Plug are together. So because Plug ends up having photos of the Man Thing, and Kyle's like, yeah, I saw that thing before, like it killed my partner. Anyways, so that happens later on in the movie. So we have Kyle and we have Terry, and it seems that here's when we start to get these people getting romantically involved. They start kissing one another, and so Schist and Jake end up showing up. And this is to be a scene that happens after an event that I have to get to now, so let's get to it. So we have the Schists trying to go on and get rid of Renee because he's still a factor and he could still go on and out Schist for killing Ted. But also we find out later that there is to be another death that may have been a result from Schist, one way or the other. Because come to find out, when they go through the body of Jim, they find out that there is a bullet in Jim's spine, and come to find out that is connected to Schist. And Terry is to get a call from the coroner stating that now Jim was to get killed by Schist, and so Terry then runs off to the swamp where Kyle is at to let him know that Kyle's in danger and that Schist was to, of course, kill the previous sheriff. And so Terry's now going off with Kyle here to be his guide, but then not only that, but like try and hope that she can figure out a way to protect Kyle from getting killed here. So, anyways, we have Wayne and we have Rodney who go out into the swamp trying to kill Renee, trying to find him. And so both of these characters are to be drinking coffee. Rodney is to say that Wayne puts the coffee on too strong, and so now Rodney has to take a crap. So when Rodney returns, both Wayne and Rodney decide that they need to start rowing to find this Renee guy. So it seems at some point from them rowing throughout the night, at some point, one person is to get stalled or have issues kind of moving their boat. We then have Wayne and Rodney who end up separating to a part where Wayne ends up getting branched and killed. And Rodney ends up going back to try to find his brother instead of looking for Renee. And now Rodney's getting ticked because he has had to now go on and focus on refinding his brother instead of Renee. So Rodney does finally find Wayne kind of in pieces or torn apart, and then Rodney ends up also getting killed in the same manner that everyone else does with the man thing, kind of branch through the body. So now that I've covered all that, now we have Shist looking on at Kyle and Terry kissing. And so now that it seems that Wayne and Rodney aren't getting results, Shist is to say, it's like, well, I think I need to go on and I need to do this myself because I can't even trust my own son to kill Renee and do what needs to get done. So both Shist and Jake make their way off into the swamp, and at the same time, so does Kyle and Fraser. So we have Fraser and Kyle going off to the swamp, and we have Fraser mentioning how there are certain points where he just wants to cuff himself to his place, so he has a good reason for not being able to make it to work every day, because Fraser just hates this job so much. So, and that also, like, it's dangerous and will probably lead to his death. So, it seems at some point that this boat is to have a malfunction to where they run out of gas, and we have our characters now having to row this boat to Mike Ploog's home that is nearby this dark water. So, come to find out, Kyle and Fraser, while making it to Mike Ploog's place and realizing that there was no one there, we all of a sudden have it where Fraser is to get attacked by the Man Thing, and the Man Thing ends up tearing Fraser apart. To, of course, have Kyle, now separating from his partner, then meets up with Mike Ploog, who has just now seen this Man Thing, and Ploog is to have a number of photos of this Man Thing, and they're like, oh, so this must be some man thing, like, whatever. So they figure out, they come up with the title of the movie. So Kyle is to now say to Ploog, it's like, well, hey, you're coming with me. You have all the evidence of this Man Thing entity. So, like, you're coming with me to solve this case. And instead, Mike is to go on and say, no, like, I'm going to go out into the swamp to get a better picture of this thing so I can get a article in Life magazine. And Kyle's like, Life magazine doesn't even exist anymore. And so Mike just runs off anyways. So we come to find out both Jake and Shist are making their way through this swamp, and come to find out we have Jake and Shist who separate. Jake makes his way through this water to find Renee, and Renee ends up smacking Jake with this gun that Jake has. Like, he disarms him and then smacks him, and then knocks him out here to the point of possibly death. And so Renee goes on to make his way to this oil tower to try to plant explosives on it, hoping that this will possibly get rid of the Man Thing. So we have Shist making his way through this swamp to see this flashing. Shist ends up opening fire and ends up accidentally killing Mike in the process. So Shist is to say, like, well, hey, like, that's for taking my photo. So we have Kyle going through the swamp, and so Terry, after getting a phone call while at the police station, finding out that the previous sheriff was shot by Shist's gun, we have Terry making her way to the swamp. She finds Kyle miraculously, and both of them make their way through this swamp to then find that Shist is going after Renee and is going to kill him before Renee uses these explosives. So we, of course, realize here that since now Kyle has been experiencing this whole man thing, we then realize that Kyle is to understand what's going on here, that this is all meant to have Schist getting killed by this man thing. And so when Kyle and Terry make their way to see Schist, and Schist is thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to kill Terry off, this protester, and Renee, and kill this new sheriff that's kind of getting on my nerves. So, like, I'm going to kill everybody off on one fell swoop here, and all my problems will all go away. And so Schist is saying, like, yeah, I'm going to kill you guys. And Kyle is like, no, like, he's going to kill you. And Schist is like, what are you talking about? That's all of a sudden when the man thing arrives, appears, and Schist is to start to open fire with what good that does, because the man thing is an unstoppable force. So the man thing goes on to grab Schist and is to take a oil container and is to put oil inside of Schist's body to then have him drowned in his own oil. Kind of ironic. And so after Man-Thing kills Schist, Man-Thing then turns to want to start to attack on Kyle and Terry. And Renee is to want to step in and try to do the right thing here. Plus, he realizes that Man-Thing won't stop until it gets its absolute revenge. And so Renee is to plant these explosives and let them go off. And come to find out, the man thing is still standing after this explosion all happens. And the man thing's like, oh, like nothing happened. Great. Let's continue to kill people. But, we also had the man thing at some point in this story. Pete Horn was to sacrifice himself to the man thing, and the man thing does go on and see Pete and starts killing him with its power. And so, yeah, like that was a quick death because Pete just wanted to be sacrificed, realizing that this thing won't stop and will probably kill everyone. So Pete's just like, well, hey, like, get your vengeance. So after Renee is dead, after this oil tower is destroyed, we then have Man-Thing realize that everything was to now be reset. That the swamp is now safe. That the Man-Thing's vengeance is now to be complete. And all of a sudden, the Man-Thing is to be dragged back from whence it came. And so we have Kyle and Terry watching on as the man thing is to be dragged back into its hole, and the swamp is to no longer have the man thing within it any longer. So we then have the huzzah huzzah moment. Both Kyle and Terry are to now like realize like, man, like let's get the heck out of here. So I'm sure there was a number of reports they had to file and all these kinds of things to wrap up this whole story. And speaking of which, I think I'm going to just try and wrap this bad boy up. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Man-Thing. There might have been some pieces and parts of here that I didn't go fully into. But other than that, I think the explanation of this movie hopefully was good enough. There were certain scenes that I forgot about and I had to like double back from. So with that said, let me know in the comments below if you ever saw this movie, if you randomly found it on Tubi or whichever. But anyways, we'll see what happens with Werewolf by Night, and I'll have uh, reviewed that hopefully when it comes out because I want to get to that as soon as I can, because I am really just interested in that character, regardless of how the movie might pan out. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.